we're going to jump around to the various clips of other training DVDs that we've done over the years. We're going to go through prospecting, email prospecting, telephone prospecting, and then the 6 stages of the sales cycle. The first stage being rapport, building up trust. The second stage being investigating specific needs or probing with questions to the client. The third stage, demonstrating our capabilities, that we can support the client in his solutions. The fourth important part, sending out that proposal, what should be included in the proposal, and then getting commitment from the client, and then very finally what we should do as the sales rep when that solution is implemented. Now, regardless of whether you're using a manual system or you're using a prospecting system such as the Sales Tracker, the starting point would be to build up a call list of people that you're going to phone, cold prospects, so to speak. That might be existing customers in the business if you're new to that specific business and there's nobody servicing them, or it might be a completely new list. Now, somebody once came up to me and said, "Craig, I'm new to the sales industry. Tell me, what book can you recommend for me?" I had to think for a minute and say to him, "Well, you know, the best book for you is the phone book. If you're new to sales, you don't even have to start with a phone book. You know at least 30 people. Write down the list. Think of people that might need your specific product. Perhaps those 30 people you can phone to find additional referrals. If you've been in sales for a while, even better, go to your existing clients and start building up a referral list, because invariably your existing clients are in the industry that you're targeting. They know other people in the same industry, or they're in a certain income level, know other people in the same income level, or people that are likely to also be your clients, they know. So all you've got to do is you've got to go and say to them, "Listen, I've been servicing you for a while. Are you happy with the product? Are you happy with our service? I bet you know 1 or 2 people. Do you mind giving me 1 or 2 names?" And always start with the 1 or 2 names, but the minute they're giving you 2, maybe you can push for a 3rd and a 4th and a 5th. But if you say, you know, 5 or 6 people, invariably they're going to say no. And don't phrase the question, "Do you know?" Perhaps say, "Is anybody else that you know that's also recently got married? Anybody else that you know that's also buying a house?" Ask him to take out his cell phone and browse through some names. Say to him, "What about John? What about that guy?" as he's going through the names. And prompt him, because if clients get a bit of prompting, they're bound to find people that they can recommend. Another fantastic source is industry magazines if you're working a specific industry, or trade associations. You can often get a list of names from them. Sometimes commerce industries, for example Chamber of Commerce and so on, can give you a name of businesses and business owners if you're struggling to find a list. But the starting point is obviously to get your call list. Once you have your call list, you then need to pick up the telephone and start phoning these prospects. Now, I recommend that you do the phoning yourself. Don't get a secretary to do it. It's far more personal if you're speaking to a business owner to speak to him yourself. You may think it's professional to get somebody else to phone, an impression of a big organization, but believe me, that's not true. Sometimes though you find gatekeepers and you can't always get to that business owner. You have to deal with their secretary. Well, just be direct. Don't start explaining to the secretary what you're about. First ask, "Can I speak to Mr. John Smith, please?" If the secretary then asks, "What's it about?" you can explain to him, "Look, it's a private matter. Do you mind putting me through to Mr. John Smith?" That may be one way to handle it. Otherwise, you could say, "Look, it's Mr. John Smith. I've been referred to him by so-and-so," if it comes from a referral, "and I'd like to discuss the matter with him." You don't have to tell the secretary the full sales process, because invariably she's going to shut you down before you even get to him. A few points to bear in mind when telephoning a prospect. Just remember, the purpose of the call is simply to secure an appointment. Don't try and sell on the telephone unless you've got a product that requires selling on the telephone, and that's something completely different. But for most products, it's preferable just to build up some anticipation so that the client's eager to meet you or the person that you're phoning on behalf. You need to be very enthusiastic on the phone, and so it might help by sitting in front of a mirror, smiling on the phone, because we're able to pick up whether a person is surly or whether they're happy on the other end of the line. And also make sure that you call during reasonable hours. If you're calling 7 in the evening or 6 in the morning, it might not be well accepted. Be very professional, be polite and courteous, and greet the individual. In fact, greet him to the extent of using his name on 2 or 3 occasions in the first few seconds of the call, because you really only have those first few seconds to grab the person's interest. So make sure that you get right to the point early in your call. When doing email marketing, you want to try and grab your prospect's attention as quickly as possible. So put a header in bold at the top of that email. Now, the header could be humorous, it may be flippant, just depending on the industry and the type of product that you're selling. And make sure though that it's interesting, that it uses the AIDA principle: attention, interest, desire, and so it really grabs that person straight away. Your letters could also contain positioning statements that focus on the benefits of the product. Don't just fill it full of features, but the value that you're adding, the benefits that it will bring. And try and incorporate a call to action. We've found that if you use something that's powerful, that gets the person to respond in a certain time period, you're going to have the most success. Situations with customers or clients change practically every day, and so you need to make sure that when there is a change in circumstances, you're there, your name is remembered. The old adage, out of sight, out of mind, certainly applies. And so through repetitive contact with your clients, you're building on that very first part of the sales process. Remember, that part is to build trust or rapport with the client. And so with your contact, whether it's through email, through fax, through telephone, through newsletters, through sales brochures, whatever method you utilize, you're able to build credibility in the mind of your client. And that's what you want. The more they see your name, the more familiar and credible your name becomes, and your product and your business becomes, especially when they associate with you solutions to problems you can solve, where they associate value that you're able to deliver. And so continually bringing that message across to the client is going to help build that rapport, build that trust that you so need in the sales process. And therefore I suggest that you have a very carefully planned marketing strategy to complement your phone calls, your occasional contact, your birthday cards, whatever else that you're already doing to stay in touch with your prospects. And for that matter, it's not just prospects. Regular clients need that form of contact, that form of reassurance, of building trust, because you're probably in a business where you have repetitive sales, where after sales service, where annuity income is part of what you do. Now, of course, there are many methods that you can adopt to achieve this, and there's several tools that are available to you. But on this disc, you're going to find a product called Sales Tracker. We believe it's an excellent product that will help assist you in achieving this particular goal with regard to managing prospects, managing calls, managing, in fact, the whole sales process. And so with the investment in high-powered computers and contact management or sales tracking software being so low compared to the return that you're able to achieve with these tools, I think it's plain negligent not to be computerized. There are a couple of reasons why buyers don't buy. The most obvious one is affordability. There's just no money. But more importantly, one of the main reasons is you haven't taken the time to build up the trust. Many buyers just simply don't buy because there's no establishment of trust. And there's really 5 steps, 5 important areas. The first is we need to have a little bit of an understanding of human behavior. We realize that people are categorized into different personality types, and we want to try and establish what type of person this is right from the outset. Maybe the person extends his hand and greets us, and we can see, well, this is a friendly, people-orientated person. Other people you can immediately see, they're surly, they want to get round to business, and that's one of the ways that we can help build rapport by understanding what type of person we're dealing with. Another very important part is to establish a very good first impression. We want to immediately appear presentable. We want to also establish credibility. We want to try and establish common ground and a very clear intent, as we'll discuss in a moment. So that's what rapport building is about, and it's really about connecting with your customer. The goal is to try and make the customer your friend, if possible your best friend. So the first point is understanding human behavior. Now, there's a lot of theories about that, but generally most psychologists say we can be divided up into 16 personality or character types. Now 16 is a bit difficult for us to grasp. So some other studies have divided us into 3 or 4 personality types. Just to keep things simple, we'll look at 4 very common personality types that are generally accepted as being very accurate. Every one of us have a little bit of all different personality types, but there tends to be a dominant trait. Don't come to an interview with your fingernails being dirty, your hair not brushed, and maybe body odor or bad breath. You need to make sure that you're very well groomed. Also make sure that you're punctual. As I said before, with an analytical person, if you're not punctual, you've already lost out before you've opened your mouth. Be well prepared. Make sure that your equipment works. Don't be looking for extension leads and plugs if you're using computer equipment, or pen and paper if you're using a notepad. Also be courteous. Keep eye contact with the person. That also helps build up that trust that we need by having that eye contact. Very important. Also greet the person with a smile. It might not be a natural thing for you to smile, so look in the mirror a bit when you practice your sales presentation. Make sure that you smile. And then establish credibility. Tell the person who you are. Don't be afraid to list your degrees, what your credentials are, what work experience you have. This is very important in building up trust. Tell them what your company is about. And then try and establish for commonality. And here it's really about looking and listening. Asking questions to try and establish that common ground. Look at the person's personality, their body language, the words that they use, and almost paraphrase those words. If people use certain expressions, and we sometimes find that in certain industries people talk a certain way, use those same expressions. And so listen to the way the person speaks. If a person speaks very fast, then speak very fast back to them. If a person speaks slowly, don't speak fast. Change your pace. Change the power. If somebody's soft spoken, you can speak softly too. If somebody's loud and you speak softly, there's going to be a conflict. So you'll help to build that trust by also increasing your volume or your power in your voice. It's pitch, pace and power. And then your body language. Try and mirror the customer in front of you. If he's got his arms folded, not a good idea to mirror that, because that's normally a negative sign and you want to try and get him to open up. But if he's in a relaxed way with his arms behind him, mirror that. Try and also look at his facial expressions, his gestures. If he smiles, make sure you smile back. But if you're smiling all the time and he's serious, that could also be putting him off, and maybe he thinks you're not serious. Also make sure that you establish eye contact with the opportunity to discuss things that may be of interest to him. Look around his office. See if there's a photograph on his desk of his family. Perhaps there's a picture on the wall of the 1995 Rugby World Cup. You may be interested in sport. So use that as an opportunity to find common. You can also determine the person's personality by the clues on his desk. If he's got family photographs all around, he may well be a relationship-orientated person on the top side of that graph. But the important thing is, don't just start bombarding him with how much you know about your product, because people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. The other important part of establishing trust is to establish very clear intent with the client. Ask the client up front what he wants to achieve. Say, look, if we're able to solve all these problems that you have, what I would want, what's in it for me, is that you do business with me. Is that fair? Can we proceed on that basis? And you've established very clearly up front what your purpose is. And if possible, establish the process. Tell him what questions we're going to ask. We're going to determine needs. You're going to show him the product around how it solves those needs. And the payoff for the time. Obviously, sir, when we arrive at a solution that meets your needs, a solution that you're excited about, that you want to pursue, there's obviously an investment that's required. And this can be anywhere from 7,500 to 50,000 Rand, depending on the number of users, if it's a software product or whatever your product is you're saying. Tell me, sir, would that amount be able to meet your budget, somewhere between those figures? So this whole process of determining the need or probing can start with things like questions of what has been your experience with accounting software in the past? How do you currently feel about accounting software? Is to simply ask, well, what problems are you now experiencing? And then dig a little deeper. Say, what is this problem costing you each year? How much time are you wasting in sorting this problem out? Now, the reason we ask those additional questions is to try and get areas of pain, discomfort for the customer. So he realizes, hang on, this is wasting my time, this is costing me money. And we make sure that when we get those responses, we jot them down on a piece of paper, very neatly in point form, so that we can address them one at a time.
or if you have the Sales Tracker software program, there's an area that will allow you to actually jot those problems so that they can be addressed in a very systematic way. So the process is really uncovering the problems and then converting that problem to a need. And the way we do that is simply through questions, through not just fact-finding questions, but feeling-finding questions, trying to identify the emotions behind the facts, why the client's feeling that way, and then intensifying those emotions, especially if they're negative emotions, pain, discomfort about the current situation. The next step is to build a very clear understanding of the needs, and we do that by saying, right, from this list of problems or needs that you've identified, Mr. Smith, what is a priority for you now? What would you like to see addressed first? Again, the Sales Tracker software is fantastic because you can actually scale every problem and get a good graphic visualization of what should be addressed first. And then part of clearly understanding the client's needs is confirming with him, saying, assume that we could find a way to solve these problems to your satisfaction. Would you then be in a position to buy? So we've prioritized it. We've asked him the question, now if we can solve these problems, would you be in a position to buy? If he says no, well, at that stage you probe further and you say, well, is there another problem? Why would we not buy? So you don't have to continue unnecessarily. But in all likelihood, you'll say yes, most definitely. And if he says yes, most definitely, whatever he says, put that in big bold letters on your notepad or in your product so that he can see it. You can come back to it if there's ever an objection later on in the sales process.
The third stage of the sales process, or the supporting stage, is an often misunderstood and sometimes ignored stage, but obviously very crucial. And it really involves pre-closing in a sense, confirming, checking with the client that you have all the facts, all the information. And so you do that by saying, have I got all the relevant information? Mr. Prospect, is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you may be looking at? Is there anything else we haven't discussed? So confirm it with him. Find out that you have all the information, all the buyer's problems. And if your client says yes, then you proceed to almost the pre-close, which is all part of the supporting stage. You say, look, so if our product or service, and I'm not saying it will, but if it does manage to satisfy these needs that we've jotted down here, are we happy to go ahead with it? At that particular stage, you'll either say yes, you'll say, well, I've actually got to discuss this with my business partner or my wife or whoever it may be. Or you may say, well, I want to also see what else is in there in the market. If your price is right, what the competitor's offering. You can say to him at that stage, look, Mr. Prospect, it's my job, obviously, to assist you with that. I wouldn't be offering you my product if I didn't believe that it could compete, and I'll let you know where we compete and where we fall short. Is that fair, Mr. Prospect? On that basis, can we go ahead? And you can continually pre-close him before you go into the final process. So let the client know that you're on his side, that you're there to support him, that you'll give him the information that he needs. That's crucial before you can progress to closing. Listen to the customer, listen to what his needs are, and confirm them along the way through the sales process. And your confirmation is almost a form of closing. So the old saying that the ABC of selling is to always be closing is quite true, because throughout the process you're asking questions, isn't it true, and closing along the way. So your form of confirmation may take the form of a notepad or software such as the Sales Tracker, and at the end of that you confirm with a concluding summary of everything that you've confirmed along the way. In other words, so you are happy with ABC. You also said that you are happy with EFG, and notice we ticked here that you are happy with XYZ. Is that right, Mr. Client? And so you're confirming in the form of summary that he's happy with all these things. You've got that big red yes jotted down on your notepad or in your software, and so straight after that you just simply assume the close. So, can I install on Friday? Does that suit you? Fine, let's complete the paperwork, whatever your product is that you're selling. What we want to look at now is 4 or 5 forms of closing that suit the specific personality type or character type. Remember, we had people that could be boxed in a sense into expressive, amiable, driving, or analytical people. And every person needs to be handled slightly differently. So you may find that certain closing techniques work better with certain personality types. I've tried to just share 4 or 5 closing techniques with you designed around each of those personality types. One of the most common forms of closing is summarizing simply with a list of yeses and nos or pros and cons. And this type of technique tends to work best with the analytical type of personality. An analytical person will do exactly that when making a buying decision. He'll weigh up alternatives. And he's a rational, reasoning type person. And so all you do with this particular technique is you take out a piece of paper, put a line down the middle, and on the left hand side you say pros or yes, and on the right hand side you say no or cons or reasons not to buy. So the reasons to buy on the right hand side you then start listing. Perhaps you list what you've already summarized as being acceptable. Yes, the tax benefits are good, it's able to make my business more efficient, whatever that list was, and you simply jot them down and you get his consensus and agreement as you're going through the list. Then when it comes to the other side, the cons, you pose the question. So what can we put on this side? Is there any reason that we shouldn't be buying? And you shut up. You wait for him to come up with anything on that side of the list. And if he does, well, perhaps it's something that you've covered already. Then make sure that you highlight that. You say, well, we covered this issue up front. Perhaps it's a money issue. Or we covered your budget up front when we asked you, could you afford between 7,500 and 50,000? And remember, you said yes. So assuming that budget isn't an issue, is there anything else? And you don't put money down because you've closed that already. And wait to see what he comes up with. Don't prompt any negatives. And then at the end of the day, you might have a list with 1 or 2 things on the right hand side and a long list on the left. And so you simply say, well, that looks pretty convincing, doesn't it? Should we go ahead? And that's simply the pros and cons. It works with most people, but very well with the analytical type individual, especially when you're struggling to get him to commit. For the expressive type individual that likes to talk, that's a good promoter, that's a rapid, impulsive type person, sometimes you've got to hit a few emotional buttons, get them thinking, get them dreaming. And the good way to do that is with a nice motivating story. Of course, you've got to select your story very carefully. Sometimes it's a positive story where somebody's taken the product and they benefited. Sometimes it's a negative story, like in the insurance industry. Frank Bettinger has fantastic negative stories of people that didn't take out the policy. They were sitting and thinking about disability or death, and something tragic happened. But make sure that you tell these stories with emotion. And when you tell them, try and appeal to people's emotions as well. And it's preferable that these stories are true, that they come across in a sincere manner. The other close is the sorry I can't have it close, which works very well with the driving type personality, people that don't like to be told they can't have it. In fact, if you tell me I can't have it, I've got something to prove. The type of people that think they're important, that like to have everything, that take action quickly, they're not as teachable, and use that personality characteristic to your benefit. The way you work with the driver type personality is you build them up. You say, well, I must say, you've got a really nice business, nice operations, or through the sales process maybe is ask some questions. Say, well, you've asked very intelligent questions. I can see you really know what you're talking about. And then you break them down. You say, well, what we can do is we can apply for this and see if they accept you, but don't get your hopes up. Or say something like, well, this product really could be a lot of money for you. Or, we don't normally deal with clients as small as you, but I suppose we've got nothing to lose by trying. That should immediately trigger in the driving personality. Well, I'll show you. I can take your product. I deserve your product. I'll show you I've got the money to buy your product. And they'll normally react quite impulsively. The other technique is PCD, pain, compassion, and then you hit them with a direct question. This works perfectly with an amiable type person, because what you want to do is you want to arouse some emotions. You want to create a little bit of pain, a little bit of discomfort with the person, and obviously this works well if you've built up trust. And you do this with a statement. for example, if you're selling insurance product, you say, well, if you don't take the disability now, the unfortunate thing is you could become uninsurable, or worse still, become disabled without sufficient security, and obviously then you can't do anything about it. And then you introduce the compassion. Now, well, we don't want that to happen now, do we? And once the client gets the feeling that you're on the side, you say, well, would you like this cover now then? It's not about what you say, but how you say it. Your tone of voice, your body language is far more important than the words that are used. If you speak with conviction, if you speak with enthusiasm and excitement, it's going to come across. And when you ask a question, remember, shut up. Unless, of course, you're using the rhetorical questioning technique. And that's also a fantastic closing technique to use regardless of what type of client you're dealing with. It's based around asking two rhetorical questions and then a question that requires a response. And also your tone of voice is important. Ask the questions with interest and enthusiasm. Nod your head when asking them, so your body gestures are good too. And the first question is, can you see how this would improve your business efficiency, or whatever your product is? Can you see how this would help boost your investments? You're interested in boosting your investments, aren't you? Now, if you're ever going to start with an investment plan, when would be the best time to start? So once you've asked that final question, shut up. Give him the opportunity to answer. Remember, the goal is to create the urgency needed to purchase, to get that client thinking along the lines and overcoming the objections. So various closes that we've discussed so far work very well for high commitment items, perhaps to a corporate market where there might be more than one decision maker. But sometimes when there's a low commitment item in a retail environment or in the personal market, you may be able to use other closing techniques which are maybe slightly a little bit more pushy, if I could put it that way, and put a little bit more pressure on the purchaser to make a decision. Now, this is a very clever method. It's just really about asking two questions, two positive alternatives, this or that, and you're not allowing the buyer the opportunity to say no. In other words, questions such as, would you like it in blue or green? Tell me, sir, would you like to sign the application with your pen or mine? Will you be taking the fleet management module and the CRM module? And of course, when you ask questions like that, it's not giving the buyer the opportunity to think about not taking it, to think about no. He's thinking about the two alternatives, and hopefully if he says, well, no, we won't have the fleet management, but we're considering CRM, or no, we don't think we'll have either modules, there's almost a commitment to, alright, well, we're going ahead with the rest of the product. If he says, no, I prefer green, to your choice of red or green, he's committed himself and the purchase has been made. The other form of close is the blank application form close. Now, that works very well in the insurance industry and other industries where you actually need an application form to close. And so you begin the consultation with that application form in front of you, and as you have very pertinent points that come out, jot them down on the application form. First time you start writing, the customer may feel a bit uneasy, may even say something about it, and you can just reassure him and say, look, there's no obligation to sign at the end of this presentation. Just, I've got a really bad memory. If you don't mind, I'm going to jot things down on the application form, and at the end of the day, if you don't want to go ahead, well, I'll just simply tear it up. The other form of close is a sharp angle close, and here it's about responding to a question with a question instead of yes and the normal answer that you would give. And by responding in this way, you're almost creating an opportunity to get some sort of commitment to the client. It's a form of closing. So, for example, the client says, does the premium increase with inflation? It's easy for you to say, yes, it does. But instead you say, well, would you want it to increase with inflation? Or, is the product able to capture timesheets? Would you want it if it were able to capture timesheets? And then a very popular close that's been spoken about by of the well-known gurus in the sales field is the trial close. Some have referred to it as the puppy dog close because pet shop owners are very well known for this, where you come into a pet shop, you fall in love with a little puppy, and he says, well, why don't you take it home? Now imagine if you've spent a weekend with the puppy and the kids have got attached to it, that you're going to bring it back to the store on Monday. He knows the minute you've walked out of the pet shop with that puppy, it's yours. In South Africa in 1975 the TV set came out and nobody had TV sets. Exactly the same thing. The guys used to say, take the TV home to your family and you can bring it back on Monday. You think a weekend watching TV with a family, what is father going to do when he goes and loads it in his truck and takes it back on Monday? He rather walks out with his checkbook and pays for it. Same with software. You can say, well, rent the system for 6 months before you buy and make a decision then. Encourage you to buy it now, and if for some reason you're unhappy, we give you a 21-day guarantee. At any stage you can bring it back for a full refund, no questions asked. Of course, it's human nature that people are not going to bring back things, but it's nice to know. It gives them that peace of mind which helps them actually go and take the product. You can even use it in a retail, a store environment. Listen, take it now, pay for it now. Really, if you're not happy, come and see me and I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. Besides, the law has for certain products a certain period of cooling off anyway. Of course, no presentation on closing is complete without discussing how to overcome objections. And it's very simple. You've just got to show the customer that you're interested in them and that you acknowledge their objections. And so you do that by listening very carefully, hearing the objection out. Don't interrupt while the customer is telling you what his problem is. But then afterwards, ask for elaboration. Say, what do you mean by that? And let him elaborate a little bit further, making sure that everything is very clear. And then once you're sure about what his objection is, you say, well, if I understand you correctly, in other words, you clarify the specific objection to him. And now the customer is very clear that you know exactly what the objection is. One of the objections that is often used is, I'd like to think it over, or I'd like to discuss it with my wife, or I'd like to discuss it with my business partner. But all those excuses are really just ways of brushing you off. It probably means that you haven't given them sufficient information to make a decision, because hopefully through the sales process you've established up front who the decision makers are. And so if he says, I'd like to think it over, use the is it technique. Well, what is it that you'd like to think it over? Is it the product that you're not sure about? Or is it our company that concerns you, Mr. Prospect? Or is it perhaps me, Mr. Prospect? And let him answer those questions. And if he says no to all of those, say, well, I can only think that it's the price that's worrying you, Mr. Prospect. And if he also says no, and says, if it's none of this, what is it that's really troubling you? And he's really got to give you an answer. And whatever that answer is, say to him, look, I understand. Actually, I'm very disappointed. It's really my fault now because I haven't explained that to you properly. You're saying it's the company. Well, did you know that our company has been around for 18 years? I forgot to mention that for you. And let me explain to you just who our shareholders are. And then you go into whatever that objection is and you try and overcome that and clarify it, because now you're very clear about the objection. And sometimes the client doesn't want to say, well, I actually think it's too expensive. So reduce the price objection to the ridiculous. For example, if you're marketing an insurance policy and they could say they could afford 450 Rand a month, say that's only 15 Rand a day. Now, for the company's obligation to pay you R1 million lump sum payment, is it worth covering yourself at 15 Rand a day? Or in the case of the software rental, that's only 12 Rand a day. Now, what is that specific problem costing you each and every year? You say between 20 and 25,000 Rand on a lost product. Alright, that's fine. So we can curb that shrinkage. What about the time in tracking that product? What can you quantify for that? Let's work out a figure and you maybe come up with 30, 40,000 Rand and say, right, well, your obligation is 12 Rand a day. That makes the decision easy, doesn't it?